Welcome back to Stories from the Ashes, where we pontificate on good books and the stories that define and refine us. I'm Amber, and I'm here with Amanda per usual, and today our special guest is Tim Davis, author and illustrator. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
We are so glad to have you. So I have to say, you don't know this, but my husband is kind of a running joke is that he's like the non-reader, and he grew up and he remembers reading Goosebumps, and then he loved The Great Gatsby in school, and that was it. And then about 10 years ago, I also found out he read The Boxcar Children, which really elevated him. But we were sitting in bed the other night talking about upcoming episodes, and I was like, yeah, and Tim Davis is coming on. He did the Mice books, and he's like, doesn't know the Mice book. So he's like, okay, that's great. It's like he also did all the drawings for the hidden pictures and highlights. My husband's face lit up like a kid in a candy store. Like for the first time in his life, he was jealous of one of my guests. He's like, I love those. And he told me, I can't remember what, but he's like, they were on this page. Like he told me exactly what page. And I was like, did you turn to those first before reading the articles? He's like, articles? Highlights also had articles. So apparently article highlights was a one-hit wonder to him. It was the hidden pictures, and he thinks you're a god.
It was one hit wonder to me too.
I did.
You didn't do all of them.
I did more than anybody else, but I did not do all.
Yes,
I love those too. I actually looked forward to going to the dentist because the dentist always had those. Yep. I didn't read the articles either, so I really enjoyed those.
Yes, so you are the most prolific.
Well, one of my favorite recent projects was a dentist's office asked me to do a mural of a hidden picture, because I thought that was so fitting to have a life-size or big wall-size mural at the dentist office for a hidden picture.
So did you do it already, or are you waiting to do it?
No, I did that one a while ago. Somewhere in Texas. I've never gotten to see it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fun. What kinds of did you hide dentist related items, or
no, you don't want to think about the dentist when you're at the dentist.
True. That's true. You want to be distracted.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. As a kid, I did not know that you were that person as I was enjoying the illustrations and highlights, but we did read all of your Mice books in our home. So nice. I have one of them unpacked from our fire so far, Mice of the Nine Lives. And I really loved these. They're little stowaway mice. Here's an example for the reading level for people that are watching along. And little stowaway mice, and the pirates are dogs, and the cats work for the queen, and it's super cute. And you don't really get a lot of good pirate stories until you hit Treasure Island, which is a much higher reading level. So really enjoyed these, and I've had so much fun finding so many other people that remember these books so fondly as well in our group from their childhood. And I was talking to my sister yesterday, and she's like, I loved those pirate mice. I'm like, they weren't the pirates, they were the stowaways. She remembered them.
Traveled with the pirates probably as much as anybody, but they were always loyal to the queen.
Yes, they were. We do a reading challenge.
It's fun to meet people that read them years ago, because those were published, 25 years ago or so. And so now most of the readers I have are people that are older like you, that are not kids anymore. They have their own kids. I think I told you before, one of the baristas that I frequent, a coffee shop that I frequent, was the one that insisted that I write more books about the mice, and he's really responsible for some of the books that I've published since.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You were sharing some of that story with us, that you'd hit a dry spell for some years, that you'd written the books and kind of shelved them because they didn't feel right. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that experience? I think a lot of people just think, an author sits down and writes a book and edits and moves on, but what do you do when you write something and you're like, this doesn't feel like it's right, and I don't know what to do with it?
Yeah, that was, I think I told you I had some pretty early successes, which maybe spoiled me a little bit. because I got a lot of things published early on when I just started writing. They were looking for the kinds of adventures that I like to write. So I was pretty confident in my writing, and I thought, like, okay, the publishers will want this if I write it, right? But this next one, the offshoot of the mice book, the first one that I call the Island Rule, it was all about the characters at the last island the mice had visited, and I really liked those characters. And I thought, boy, this is going to make a great offshoot series. And so the first book, I wrote it, and I got lots of encouragement from the publisher initially, but then they suddenly said, "No, I guess we're not going to take it." It's like I was really pretty devastated, to tell you the truth, because I thought, especially that series had been so successful, I thought an offshoot from it would be, continuing success.
Right.
Did they give you any reason?
I'm sorry?
Did they give you any reason why they decided not to take it?
Not enough of one. I'll just say that. Not enough to satisfy me.
Oh, that's disappointing.
So
and there's also nothing you can do when you don't have a reason. Like,
yeah, and so it left me very kind of like, and it was right at a time when we were moving, and we soon had took in my parents because my mom was aging and having Alzheimer's, and it was just like all the stuff all happened at once, and so there wasn't really any time to think about fixing it at that point. I knew there was some issues, but it just got stuck in a box and was put in the attic. And then, life just happens for years at a time, which is what I hear from many, many artists and authors.
Yeah.
And it just got set up there, and I would see it occasionally. I'd go up in the attic to get something, and I'd say, "Oh, there's that story." And I would even sit there in the attic and read it for a while to see if it would spark interest again. And I would get to a certain point in that story, and it would go flat. I mean, the introduction was good, the leads were good, the characters were good. But when I got to that certain point, I thought, man, it's just not growing. The story doesn't have the arc that it needed to have. So I just like disgustedly stuff it back in the box and go back downstairs and forget about it again. Until Ethan, this young man who was a big mice book reader in his family, he found out who I was, and this was after I'd been going to that coffee shop for months, so we knew each other pretty well. And then, but Tim Davis, how many of those are there? So he finally realized I was that Tim Davis, and he asked me if I had written any more books about the mice, and I said, well, kind of. And I told him about this offshoot, and he was so excited. He called his brother on the phone right then to say that I was sitting there, because they had grown up with these books. And he said, "You've got to get it out of the attic. I want to read it. And if there's something that needs to be fixed, I'll help you fix it." So
that's awesome.
I dedicated that first book to him, because he, without his enthusiasm, never would have pulled that book out of the attic, I don't think.
I've noticed in life that sometimes problems can be solved in the most unusual ways if you just happen to bring them up to random people. It's amazing how much knowledge people have that you don't know they have. Maybe I don't know if Ethan is just an aspiring writer or just had some great ideas or whatnot. How did he help you with that?
Well, he did have some good ideas. He read the whole book and he wrote notes on the manuscript. And I don't know if he's an aspiring writer, but he just likes stories. And I had a very good critique group at that point, and still do. In fact, one of the other ladies in there also writes mice books. It's Melinda Long, and she's written these "Pirates Don't Change Diapers" and those books. So I'm sorry, pirate books, not mice books. But anyway, she was into the picture book aspect of pirates. You said, see, sometimes pirates have to be introduced early, right? So we get used to the way they work. So I feel like hers are the first introduction to pirates that a child should have in the picture books. And then in my books, it's chapter books. So the stories are more developed. And there's still no, I mean, the pirates they're kind of bumblers, as you know. They never really hurt anybody. They
Mm-hmm.
threaten like crazy, and they love to steal things, but nobody ever really gets hurt by them.
Mm-hmm.
So they're ideal villains for elementary school, right?
Yeah.
So anyway,
They
I
really
was good.
Oh, I was just gonna say they kind of remind me of the bumbling nature of the pirates in the Muppet Treasure Island because I watched that recently with my boys and like because Knightley was obsessed with pirates. He had us get him a pirate costume, and I was like, "What pirate stuff can I show him?" He's autistic, and um, I was gonna have him listen to Treasure Island, but I knew a lot of it was going to go over his head because of auditory processing challenges. But I was like, "Oh, the Muppet Treasure Island will at least give him some pegs for understanding where the story is going." And so we watched that, and I had forgotten just how bumbling they were. But yes, it's very similar to the nature of the pirates in your mice books. It's very gentle. They're definitely pirates. They're not the good guys. That's clear. So it's not murky, but at the same time, they're not really wreaking
They're
too much
never
havoc.
really going to hurt anybody, right? So,
Ah.
so in fact, one of the problems with the island rule was I had not brought back those pirates, the bumbling pirates. I'd had some other kind of
Mhm.
invaders that had messed with the island, but they weren't quite bad enough to
Mm.
really make you feel like there was something at stake, like the future of the island was at stake.
Yeah.
So the bumbling pirates were chasing these other. This is the revision. Were chasing those other invaders, and when they got there, they decided they would just take over the island. And of course, that
Mm.
then all of a sudden, that's the big conflict. They've got to save the island from these bumbling pirates, which, as it turns out, if you just use some good, intelligent tricks, you can almost always
Mhm.
foil them. So that's how it ends up happening.
Oh, that's great. So you so you've published 3 more books. Is that correct? The Island series is 3?
Yeah, I have them here, and this is the first one. That was the one that kind of brought him back, and
The
I didn't
Island
even know that
Rule.
there would be a trilogy, but then this other idea came to me, and it's the titles is slightly different with the question mark at the
Mhm.
end. Rules. There's these are internal conflicts that happen in the island, so I
Okay.
wanted to talk about that a little bit. And then the last one is the island rules with an exclamation point that looks like a musical note, because this one really is a musical. Um,
The musical?
it has a lot of Gilbert and Sullivan music in it.
Oh,
Oh,
They're
that's
set in
fun.
that time period, and so
right.
Mhm.
the British cats come back to the island because the mice want to visit, and the cats have always been curious about this island because of all the mice, the things the mice said about it. So they go back and they bring some royals with them, and the royals insist that the new play, the Pirates of Penzance play by Gilbert Sullivan, be performed there at the on the ship, right there at the island. So it has like 14 songs or so in it, and if when you come to a song, there is a QR code that you can go to that allows you to sing karaoke along with it. It has
That
the
Oh,
is
words
that's
and the
so
fun.
music.
fun.
So if you like to do karaoke, you'll really like this last book. It's especially if you like Gilbert and Sullivan, which
Good.
I've always loved. They're just so clever, and it's so fit into this story. Of course, I changed the words. You know, I would do
Mhm.
that. But
Mhm.
there's actually, I realized that there's like matchups between the characters and the Pirates of Penzance that were not even intended, but they're there. Like the
Mhm.
admiral, the British admiral Cat, he is the modern Navy general in essence, but he's a modern British admiral in here, and he sings that song. And of course, you have the pirates. You have the pirate king, who is Captain Cragg. Yeah, I just kept seeing, wow, all these things match up. And then you had to have one character who was on the fence, right? Who couldn't decide whether they were like Frederick. It couldn't decide whether they were going to be good or bad. And it was kind of natural because Barnacle the parrot had been left behind on the island. And so he had feelings for the island, but he still loved the pirate life and his all. So he is the character in the middle that has to be swayed to determine what his final choice will be. Will he become good or go back to his former life?
Very cool.
So
I love the interactive book concept.
Oh. The Pirates of Penzance was like my first introduction to pirates as a child.
Really?
My parents' youth group was involved in the musical at the high school, so that was my first introduction to
nice.
pirates.
Now, my kids used to perform it. We found this movie that was made in the 80s, and it was really well done. Had Linda Ronstadt as one of the main singers, and our kids loved it, and they would do videos at home and lip sync the words, and they get in their costumes. Like my son, who was like 5, would put on my fishing boots, so they looked like pretty impressive, and they'd have all these costumes on, and they would video each other singing. So that was part of my inspiration, as I knew kids would enjoy it. It's a fun story, and especially if you adapt it for the books, I thought it just makes it even better in my mind. So that's what we did.
Did those second and third books in the series come together a lot faster than the first one? Well, they must have come together a lot faster.
Yeah, the other one had that 15-year gap. So, yeah.
Were they a lot easier to write?
I'm sorry?
Were they easier to write then?
Yes, I would say, well, the second one, because I realized the pirates do play a part, even though it's an internal conflict. The pirates try to take advantage of that. But what I realized was I needed to take a different tack. I'm more into themes now. As I've gotten older, the themes are more important. And so I wanted people to understand, kids to understand, it's not always just the dangers from outside that we have to worry about, but even just conflict within can cause problems that set you up for possible defeat. So that's really what this one is about. And it comes from, there was 2 chickens in the first one who had eggs. One of the eggs hatches and it becomes a rooster who kind of becomes a little too self-important. And he wants to kind of take leadership of the island, even because he's born there and he feels like he has certain rights that way. He's a good singer because music is really important there. So he challenges the rules. And Barnacle at that point takes advantage of that to say, maybe I can make this work for the pirates and they can come back and take over the island in this time of divisiveness. So that's really what happens in the second one. And then the third one, I really wanted to bring the mice themselves back into the story.
Yeah.
Because it all came back to them. And they're hinted at in the first 2 books, but they don't actually make an appearance. And I thought, well, they need to make that appearance. They need to come back. And then I just realized, wow, I'm just doing the play. I'm just going to let this all out. It's just going to be a musical and just celebrate all the characters being backing. And there's something like 21 characters in this last book. So we got a big cast.
Yeah. Oh, I really like that. So the first series, the mice books, there's 5 of them. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then there's 3 in this. And do you feel that the story is complete? Or is there another branch that you want to write?
No, I think we're done. The mice, they've lived a long and productive life here. Like they started way back when, and they've gone through a whole generation of people and readers. So I think it's time for them to retire for good. So, and I think I mentioned I have this series of mushroom books, which is based on Mort and the Sour Scheme, which was a popular short story that I wrote many, many years ago. So now I have a trilogy of the mushroom character series. And that was kind of inspired by, this was all during COVID when everything was locked down. And the only thing that was keeping me sane was taking long walks in the woods and in the mountains here. So I was realizing, hey, there's wild mushrooms all over the place. So Mort wants to go to the wild and find his roots in the second two books. And he finds out that he's more than just like a snack food. He's actually an integral part of the forest. So, so that's my other series. And right now, I would say for the first time in many years, I don't really have a plan for the next story. So I'm having to look for inspiration.
Yeah.
Maybe you need to go spend some more time with Ethan at the coffee shop.
Unfortunately, Ethan moved away now.
Oh no.
No, I have to go find some more readers. But I definitely talking to kids. I mean, I do teach in the classroom a lot. I work with an organization called Smart Arts, and we integrate things from what we do into the lesson plans that they're learning in school. So I'm getting a lot of constant input. I mean, every school year I have second, third, fourth graders usually that are giving me input onto other things that I can do. And I don't dismiss that because they have good ideas.
Yeah. And they're probably
really
not
do.
afraid to tell you what they want to read.
That's exactly right. Sometimes they give the suggestions for a sequel. They might tell me this is what you need to do next. So if one of them wants to do that, I'm all ears right now.
Yeah, we had author Maria Farb on, and she writes a lot of fairy tale retellings that are just beautiful. But she'd written this one book, and she said that she had thought she was done, and then one of her readers basically sent her a short manuscript, like all the directions that they thought that she should take the story and everything to do for the next book. And so she decided she would write another one, and so she's writing another one and dedicating it to this kid. But
good for her. I mean,
always encourage people to reach out to the authors. And
right. The readers have more input than they realize. I think, when I used to read stories, I didn't ever think about the real author, like I could actually communicate with them. But I really want to encourage kids to do that now. I want them to think that, this is a real person. They come up with ideas. You can come up with ideas. We're not that different, really, just because we're on different sides of the page here. So I want to encourage kids to come up with ideas, and that's part of what I do when I go into classrooms, try to get them to think of creative ideas that they can write.
I was looking at the program that you're working with, and one of the things you do is teach them how to draw hidden image drawings. Is that right? Gotta keep that generation.
Well, you gotta
make a new generation of that going.
Gotta keep my foot in that door because that's the other thing. Every teacher, you know how it is. Every teacher, just like your husband, when they hear that I've worked on hidden pictures, their heart melts. Like, oh, hidden pictures! I love hidden pictures. So it's by far the biggest entree I have to any kind of school. So I have to include them in what I do, and it actually works really well because I talk about illustration on the basis of my stories. And then I lead them in making an illustration from the Island Rule or one of these books. And then I tell them the next day that we're going to turn that illustration into a hidden picture. Which
that's fun.
They cannot know that when they start drawing, or it's a disaster.
Influences.
So do you have a preference of illustration or writing, or do those just go hand in hand and you just think about them together?
I like them both a lot, and I like teaching. I do all three of them a lot. Right, every time my schedule is changing all the time, so sometimes I'm heavily into teaching or heavily into writing. Right now, I'm heavily into illustration, so I'm loving illustration. Because I'm doing a lot of it right now, and I'm glad to be able to have three things that I can switch back and forth. Because as a freelancer, you kind of need that. Because you can't really depend on one lasting for a whole year necessarily.
Yeah. So do you illustrate for other authors too then?
Sometimes, yes. I don't really recruit that as much. I do occasionally get asked. I do a lot of hidden pictures style illustrations for other companies besides Highlights, just because my name is on the Google list, And the main thing I get from other places is placemats, because they want kids to have something to do while they're waiting in the restaurant.
Very important.
So yeah, I've done a lot of hidden picture placemats over the years, in addition.
I wish more restaurants had that, because I have a 5-year-old who can't sit still.
When you go, you can tell them you know who can do it for them.
Yeah. So how did you get started with hidden pictures? Just because we're talking about them again. Is that something where Highlights or whoever the first person was like, we're looking for this, and you were like, okay, I can figure that out? Or is that something that you learned how to do, and then when you saw the ad saying we need someone who can do this, you were like, I can do that?
It's quite as simple as that. But I was freelancing, mostly in writing. It actually was about the same time I was writing my books. I was just finishing them up, and I was thinking that was all for them. And I was just trying to do more illustration work, and so sending out samples. This was back in the 90s when the internet really wasn't developed that much.
Yeah.
So we would send things out, and I sent it to Highlights, and they said, well, we really like your line style. They were doing everything in black and white then. Mm-hmm. And so we really need a lot of hidden pictures over the next few years. So would you like to try that? So I was not seeking that at all. They just said that's what they needed, and they felt like my style would fit it. So I tried one. And see, this is why I know that it doesn't work to try to think about hiding. I tried to hide things as I was drawing, and they stick out like a sore thumb. You can't do that. You can't like hide and draw around things. It doesn't work. So I turned that first one in. Of course, the art director was very gracious, but she said, you're doing it all wrong. You got to draw an illustration first and not think about what you're going to hide, and then go back and make things in it. So realizing that that's the way you do it, that's the way I teach kids how to do it without them knowing that that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
So I just started doing it, and then they just kept giving me more and more work. At that point, they were producing a lot of books with hidden pictures in them, just hidden picture books, collections, and a lot of my stuff went in there. That's how I ended up making so many. Is they would say do 10, I would do 10, they would say do 10 more, and that just went on for months. So I don't think they're doing that anymore. It's much more assignment specific, but at that point, they were really looking to get a lot of quantity for these collection books.
Well, they are definitely well loved. So.
Yeah.
A publishing question that I have. So with the Island books, did you self-publish, or were you able to find a publisher again that was willing to publish that series for you?
Yeah, I decided to self-publish without even trying to find a publisher on them.
Yeah.
I during those 15 years in the attic, the self-publishing world changed a lot. And I used to, I've been teaching writing all these years for like 30 years. And I used to always tell my students, don't even consider self-publishing back at the beginning, because it wasn't practical. It was you'd have to put these immense amount of books out, and then hope to sell them and recoup your cost. And I kept seeing that just didn't work. So when Amazon came up with their system with Kindle books,
print on demand,
it made sense. Then it's really up to you to market. But what I've realized is it's always up to you to market. It doesn't even, it doesn't matter whether you get it published by a publisher. They'll only market you for a little bit, and then it's all up to you. So since I teach in schools a lot, and I do some other speaking at events and stuff like that, I thought I kind of have an opportunity to sell, because if you speak, you're going to sell more books. It's just the way it goes. And so I just decided I'm just going to do that. I'm just going to produce them and sell them myself.
Yeah,
you have
that's great.
Ways that you would tell people who are considering self-publishing to learn to be better at marketing their books?
Well, marketing is a constantly learning. I'm constantly learning. I do have some people helping me with that now. a company, strangely enough, someone who remembers Mort the Sour Scheme, the story that about the mushroom from way back. Actually, it is now a book here. There's the book. But she remembered it, and she was starting a remedial reading program. So she found out, she was thinking, I know there was a story like that. And her art director also had read that book or that story. And he said, oh, I know who that is. It's Tim Davidson. He lives right here in Greenville. So she contacted me, and I've really been working for her ever since. She's given me a lot of illustration work to do. She has stories she's written, she's bought from me. So she's also a marketer. So she's going to help me with marketing by using their company as another platform for me to launch off for the schools that they service. So we'll see over the next year if this partnership marketing along with a publisher that didn't publish the book but is actually very interested in it will work.
Yeah. So. Yeah, that's very cool. Eric doesn't read a lot of books, but he does read a lot of articles he thinks would be of interest to me. Okay. And so the other night we were talking and he was like, did you know that most authors will not sell more than 50 copies of their book in a year? And I was like, hogwash. And he's like, no, seriously. I was like, oh, are you just talking about like all the little authors that are like self-publishing? And he's like, no, like all the authors, the majority of them will not sell more than 50 books in a year. And I was like, you need to find that article and send it to me so I can read it. So while he was finding that article, Karen Swallow Pryor, who wrote the book on reading well that we had done for a book club one year in our group, I follow her on social media, and she had posted and she was like, the majority of authors will not sell more than 2,000 books in a year. That is their top, that should be their top expectation. And only 1% will hit the bestsellers list. And authors need to like adjust their expectations. And then some authors who I greatly respect and consider to be well-known authors were commenting in her thread, and they were like, thank you for saying this. We've been struggling with feeling like we're failing. And all of a sudden I was like, how are you not selling more than 2,000 books in a year? Like it just, and Amanda and I were talking about this while you were troubleshooting getting on today. And she was like, I just don't think people are reading the way that we think they are. But it just, it blows my mind. And Karen's thing that she was like restating this again. She's like, this is why I always tell new authors, do not pay someone to publish your work because you won't make it back. You have to self-publish today. You have to keep control of as much of the pie as you can because your expectations should
be responsible for your own marketing.
Yeah. She's like, no one should be writing books to become famous and rich. She's like, that should just be the going in expectation. If that happens for you, great. But that should not be your expectation going into it. But
that's very good, and I'm glad you said that too. I'm not aware of that article. I would like to see that if you can send that to me.
Yeah,
but I think that most people do have a misimpression about what it means when like for instance, you both knew the Mice books. Lots of people know the Mice books, so they might think, oh, Tim must be making a lot of money on those Mice books. No, I'm not like making a lot of money on them. They keep selling. They do keep selling. They keep reprinting them, and I'm very happy about that. But I'm not marketing them. The publisher's not really marketing them anymore. They just people just buy them by word of mouth. And when I realized that that's really where it all ends up, you have to keep stirring up the word of mouth as the author. Right. It's all on you. And so what's the best audience? Well, your readers. And where do I find my readers? In elementary schools. So that is really what I decided is that's as good a marketing as I can really do is to connect with elementary schools.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when you care about your audience, that's a great way to connect with them authentically instead of just, trying to force a relationship or a connection to market, but you genuinely enjoy your art. You genuinely enjoy teaching kids how to do art. It was very evident in all the pictures that I was looking at on your website that you guys were all having fun doing what you were doing.
Well, I love the connection. Yeah, like you say, the connection with the audience that's going to read your book or is reading your book. It's just the most wonderful thing, really. And even now, still sometimes kids will come in, like when I'm at the coffee shop and their parents know who I am, but their kids are reading my books and they don't know who I am. So the parent will introduce them in their awe, like, I can't believe it's Mr. Davis. There he is. He's right there. He's drinking coffee. It's funny because it makes you feel like a pseudo celebrity, but it's really just because they love the work, they love the stories, and that's what's really rewarding about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate the books that you have written, and I appreciate being able to have pirate stories for my younger kids because I think it is a fun historical concept and type of experience to be sharing with the next generation. Do you I had a question and then it just completely slipped away. Oh, you have children? Is that
Yes,
correct?
they're
I
all
believe.
grown up now. They were
Yeah.
kids when I was writing the mice books. And
do you have any grandkids?
Yes, we have. Well, we have 4 kids that are all grown up. They're all between like 31 and 26, I think. No, 33 and 26. But we have 2 grandkids who live in Detroit, so we see them sometimes. But they are in 5th grade and 3rd grade, so they're actually at my target level of readers.
Yeah. So I was wondering, do they think that you're pretty cool, or are they just like, oh, that's just grandpa and his
they
books?
mostly like me and grandpa. I think they're more into superhero stuff, and that's just not what I do. So, but they like it fine. It's just not their thing.
Right.
But I also have a granddaughter who's she's just about to turn 2, so she's still a little young. So she's not reading, obviously, but it's really fun just to think about down the road. I think she'll be reading them too. And I have cousins who have kids now. The cousins read them, and now the cousins' kids are reading them. So I got to see one of my cousins recently, and I presented him with the new book on the Island Rule. And it was just so fun. He had been a reluctant reader, and his mom had used the mice books to help get him excited about reading. So now to give one for his little kids was just really kind of a special, like, all coming around again,
Yeah.
That's nice.
That is really nice. We do a reading challenge in our Reshelving Alexandria community every year, and we have a 12-book challenge, which is just our like standard challenge. But then for people that want to read a lot, we do a 52-book challenge. But then we have a separate kids challenge and teen challenge and family read aloud challenge. And at the end of the year, we do drawings in each of the categories for people who had completed their challenge. And last year we had a 5-year-old complete the 52-book challenge. And I was like so impressed with him. Yeah. And obviously, he did it with mostly picture books, but he found one for each of the different categories that we had come up with. And I was like, well, there's really no one to draw against. So I'm just going to do the drawing for the adults as per usual. And then I'm just going to send you a book because I'm so just impressed that you're basically a kid after my own heart doing what I would have done at your age. And so I wanted to send him one of the mice books, but I was like, that's just mean to like send him a book and then make him fall in love. So then his mom has to buy the rest of the books. So I sent him like all 5. And that was like, I only knew about the 5. So I just sent him all of them. I was like, here you go, 5 books to give you a jump start on next year's 52. But he just loved them.
The Island Rule ones for the next year.
Yes, right, exactly. Now I'll have to do those. Oh, that's a good question. So do you think that the Island Rules books work as a standalone if someone has not read the mice books?
Yes, but I'm definitely going to be hinting at the mice books, and there are several hints all through. So what I want is for people, if they do just read them, they might say, well, what's with all, you keep mentioning these mice and these other ships. Yeah. So I want them to get curious enough to go back and read those.
Right.
Which I had some people say that's what they're going to do now. But I want them to really, ideally, you should read the mice books in order, and then you should read these books. That would be, and also age group. That's kind of the way they work. The younger you are, the easier the mice books are. The first ones are easier than the last ones. And then these are definitely more complex than the mice books were. So theoretically,
I was going to ask.
So what grade levels do you think that the mice books are for and then the island books are for?
I have heard of good readers in first grade starting with Mice of the Herringbone. So that seems to be kind of common, but I call it second grade, really. Second and third are the mice books. And I think these books, the Island Rules, are more like third, fourth, fifth. And then kind of like by fifth, you never know where kids are going to go after that. They might think chapter books are too young for them. But then what I find is like I get them again, like when they come around and early adults, they want to read them. And if they've read them before, they want to.
Sometimes life is busy as an early adult, and just a good nostalgic book is the way to go.
Right. You got to go, especially if you love Gilbert and Sullivan, you're going to like that book, no matter how old you are, just because it's fun.
Yeah.
I really like to. Go ahead.
Does the Gilbert and Sullivan work as a standalone? Like if you had a friend that really liked operas and Gilbert and Sullivan and you were like, oh, I'm going to just gift them this book because they might enjoy it.
Yeah.
Is there enough for it to just stand by itself and not be like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know any of these people.
No, I think they would get it still. I mean, it's got the characters are kind of iconic in a way, you know what pirates are. So you kind of get the idea of what's going on. And then again, I just think you drop hints and they say, well, there's other books like this. I want to read some of the other books now. That's what I'm like. And I'm really trying to reach out to remedial readers, the remedial kids, because I know that early on, that was what I was hearing from a lot of parents is that chapter books, especially, they weren't getting a lot of just plain fun adventure stuff in chapter books. And for me, that's all I wanted to read. So I know that there's other kids like that too. If it's just going to be about a day at school, no, please, no, I don't want to read that.
Yeah, we have a category on our literary database that's high interest, low reading level. And that's for the people who didn't start reading until they were in that 8 to 11 age range. And they don't want to be reading about Jack and Jill, who are 5 years old, and them going about the day feeding the little chicks. You know, they want something that feels more their age and more advanced in maturity. And so I do like these because they aren't children. They are young adult mice, running around having childlike innocence without, so it's not, as you said, they aren't dangerous pirates, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like a baby book if you're establishing your reading skills.
And I think also
I really like this series for that.
Boys, they tend to like a little more adventure, I think, as my opinion. But I agree, I have girl readers too. But I mean, I just think sometimes the boys are just like, give me some action here, So that was always my call for what I wanted. In fact, if I would say one of my early favorite books that caught my attention was The Hobbit. And this was way back before anybody, I mean, some people knew The Hobbit, but back in the 70s, I was reading The Hobbit and just falling in love with all that stuff. And that was very influential in like my whole sense of like create a world, make it full of adventure. And that was really what I wanted to be able to do.
Yeah, I love that. We usually ask our guests to open by telling us 3 of their most influential books in their life. And we haven't had a guest in a while in recording because Amanda and I have been recording together. So I completely forgot that opening question. But besides The Hobbit, do you have 2 other books that come to mind?
Yeah, definitely The Hobbit was the most influential book. And of course the accompanying series, Lord of the Rings. But I would say when I got a little more into reading kids' books later, this was past when I was a kid, but one of the books I really loved was Because of Winn-Dixie. And it came out, Kate DiCamello's book came out when all 4 of our kids were at home and 3 years apart. And it appealed to every single one of them on a different level. And to me, that was, wow. That's good writing
Yeah.
when you can catch that span of ages and those boy, girl, and they all loved it for different reasons. So I thought that book is in my opinion, is one of the classics, really, of children's literature. Another one that I like for a slightly different reason is Holes by Louis Sykar. That, when I first read that, I was blown away by his ability to like put these two parallel stories and then merge them at the end. So much so that I tried to do that on another story I was working on. That's another manuscript in my attic, but it's harder than it might seem, to be able to make things come together. So that's been another one of my favorites, probably for a long time. So,
how many manuscripts do you have in your attic?
Yeah, right.
You have complete manuscripts, like partial?
Any. Complete, incomplete, whatever.
Oh man, I've got sci-fi stuff that I've worked on. None of that's been published. It goes through my critique group. See, we meet every couple times a month, and so get a lot of feedback. And sometimes they'll be disappointed that I put one aside. I have another, like an adventure that's really kind of serious, more definitely an adult level action adventure, but I've put that one aside too. I just don't know. Those genres are so different for me. I don't know if I can pull it off. It's
I know, but your original audience are like all adults now. It sounds perfect.
That's true.
Sounds like the right time.
Maybe you're right about that. Maybe I'll get them back out. I don't know. I need to talk to somebody to convince me to get those out of the attic. But no, I like trying different things like that. I'm sorry, what?
We're not good enough. We can't convince you.
Well, if you wrote an adult book, my husband might read it,
Oh, well, there you go.
Like, it's by Jim Davis, Eric. And he put a highlight in the back of it. There's a hidden picture in it.
There's something hidden in it. Oh, speaking of which, there is a kind of hidden picture in this one. Kind of.
Okay.
And there's also, I put a secret code in here, which I will explain. One of the problems that the pirates have is they can't spell. And it hinders them greatly in this story, because they have to be able to spell in order to, in essence, break a spell that Barnacle gets in. So they have to do it by spelling correctly, and they just can't do it. So every time the pirates sing, there's a ton of misspellings in there. And at the end, there's a way you can break through how to break through. If you spell them all right, you end up with one letter that's missing. And that letter is the crucial letter that would have solved the pirates' dilemma. So there's a little extra stuff in there.
Yeah, inspire kids to learn to spell.
That one was inspired by a teacher. I was working with, I think it was a third grade class. And I had the manuscript. I was reading a little section from that book because I was working on it then. And the teacher said, "Do you notice how the pirates talk different? And you can see it in the way the words are spelled." And it's like a light went out in my brain. I thought, whoa, I think I could do something with that. So I told her later, I said, "You really gave me a good idea there." And it's in this book now.
Nice.
Oh, that's fun.
I love seeing the little places inspiration can come from. Something that we try to incorporate in our episodes when I remember, because sometimes, as Amanda will tell you, I'm going a mile a minute and my brain doesn't slow down because I'm so just focused. But I made a huge note to myself, remember to do this, is we try to read a book review from a kid about a book that they've read that they want to recommend to our listening audience. So I'm going to do that real quick. And this book review comes from Anne Lizandra, which is her nom de plume, age 11. And she says, "I love Shakespeare. My favorite Shakespeare books are his original plays, but I also like reading his stories retold. Edith Nesbit's book, Beautiful Stories from Shakespeare, is probably my favorite retelling. She really does tell the stories in a way that's beautiful and easy for the children of today to understand. I like her comedy of errors, which is the hardest play for me to understand. She makes the story easy to follow while still using some quotes from Shakespeare himself. I like how she describes Puck in A Midsummer's Night's Dream. She describes him in a way that makes children like him and laugh at his mischievous and funny ways. I really like her version of Midsummer's Night's Dream also. It's funny, sweet, and bitter too, although it doesn't end bitter. It is a classic that I think all children and adults should read. Beautiful Stories from Shakespeare is great and is one of my favorite books to read, and I'm thrilled to have been able to tell you about one of my favorite Shakespeare books. So we just want to say thank you to Anne. We like Shakespeare retellings as well.
And that's
a
my
great
favorite
review.
too.
You said she's 11?
We get really good kid reviews. I'm
Very
always
good.
So jealous.
Yeah.
Like, good job, guys. I often seem like my brain just freezes at, oh my goodness, I just loved it so much. It's like I can't really do much more than that.
That's like literary criticism right there. That was very well
done.
Yeah.
And a funny thing is, I actually just recently did an integration unit with Midsummer Night's Dream, where I was talking about similarities between stories that I'd written and plot similarities, character, how they played off of each other. So we analyzed Midsummer Night's Dream in depth, and Puck, of course, was one of their favorite characters, and he compares to Barnacle the Parrot in my books. So I think it's kind of fun to analyze how books have similar structures and character development, not intentionally. It just sort of like there's certain ways that work. And
it's the way humans work. And
the humans work, right? Yeah. Or even animals that act like humans work.
Yeah. If you like Midsummer's Night's Dream, there's an author, Rajani LaRocca, who's her parents are from India, and she writes a lot of really good stories about kids who are half Indian, half white Americans, and just growing up in the give and pull of the two cultures, and being first generation born in America. And she wrote 2 Shakespeare retellings. She wrote Much Ado About Baseball, which obviously is Much Ado About Nothing, and it's very math heavy, like the kids are on a math scavenger hunt. And then she wrote Midsummer's Mayhem, and it was the first book of hers that I read, and I just fell in love with her at that point, and it has not stopped. And it is a little girl who not only has a white American dad and an Indian American mother, but she is the youngest child, and she's trying to figure out like how she belongs culturally, but also how she belongs in her family of excellent people. And her best friend has just moved, and then she meets a young boy in a banyan tree in the woods who's Puck, and there's this she's a baker. That's what she does well. And so she enters this baking contest at a new restaurant in town that's run by fairies, except people don't know it. And they give her like little special ingredients to add to her food that just kind of make everything go a little wonky for everybody around her. And I was not sure going into it how she was going to be able to handle the romance aspect, given that it's middle schoolers, but it's brilliantly handled and it's hysterical. And so I really enjoyed A Midsummer's Mayhem. If you enjoy Shakespeare retellings at all, that's a fun, quick one to read through.
I just love to analyze the way stories work. And especially when you're talking about a classic story, like how can you make it still work and like totally reset it, just change so many elements and it still has the same core to it. Well, that's fascinating.
Yeah. It was a really good story, but I'm so excited to hear about your books. Thank you so much for coming and sharing with us about them. And I'm excited to add the Island books to our shelves and to share them with my sisters who were like, he wrote more mice books. And that was actually their first question a few months ago when you told me about the Island books. I told them, Tim wrote 3 more books in this series. And they're like, are the mice in it? I was like, I don't know. I have to ask. And you were like, they're the third one. So they're definitely mice fans. 30
So there's a lot of Ethans out
later.
there. That's good to know. There's always Ethan people out there asking about the mice.
That's cool. There are a lot of Ethan people out there that want to know about the mice. So we thank you for your time. We thank you for sharing with us about your publishing experience and going alone, and the fact that we shouldn't give up on our dreams, that we might have something that we start today that isn't going to bear fruit for another 15 years, but that doesn't mean that it won't bear fruit just because it didn't now. So that's a good lesson to learn.
And I think it's not like you're just setting it aside. You're still learning in the meanwhile.
Yeah.
I felt like when I came back to it, I was a better writer than I was back then. So that's encouraging.
Yeah, that is encouraging.
Life experience still happens during that time, and makes you have more insight and so forth. So. Yeah, don't give up. Don't give up. I see many of my writing students that I've had. So I told you I've taught this for like 30 years, and I'll see them around town sometimes. And they know I'm going to ask them, like, oh, have you still writing anything? Have you? And, some of them are like going all out still, but other ones, oh, no, this happened and that happened. And I always try to make them think, that's fine. That doesn't mean you have to give up, though. It doesn't mean you're done. You can get back to it.
Yeah. That's a great lesson. So we want to thank our listeners for joining us today. And we will have all of Tim's books linked in the show notes, as well as any other books that we talked about today. And we want to remind everyone that the stories are truer than true. Have a great afternoon.